Have you heard of a write and discuss, or have you tried it in your classroom? If you've done it, you know how useful and beneficial it is for your students and for you as the teacher. If this is new to you, you'll hear in this episode about an incredibly useful collaborative writing activity that you can do right away with your students. No preparation needed. If this is not new to you, still stick around. You'll also hear some tips and new ways that will help to make your write and discuss even more effective in your classroom. So let's jump in. Are you a language teacher looking for some reassurance that what you're doing in the classroom is on the right track? Or maybe you're looking for some ways to teach even more effectively. If you're one or the other or somewhere in between, you've landed in the right place. This is the World Language Classroom Podcast with your host, me, Joshua Cabral. You're about to get tips, tools, and resources so that your students continue to rise in proficiency and communicate with confidence. Let's jump in. Vamos, allons-y. Hello, my friends. Bonjour, mes amis. Hola, mis amigos. Welcome to the World Language Classroom Podcast. I am Joshua Cabral, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your week to be with me here today and to listen to a podcast about language teaching. It is just one of the many things that I'm sure that you do that makes you an incredibly dedicated and effective language teacher. So thank you very much for being with me here today. So on today's episode, we are talking about how to do a write and discuss with your students. Now, I first heard about a write and discuss several years ago on episode number 79 of this podcast. I didn't know much about it. I had heard about it. So I invited Ben Fisher-Rodriguez on, and he described the whole thing to me. And I remember thinking, that's such a cool idea. But I didn't realize just how powerful it would become in my classroom. And as I reflect on it now and how much it has become a part of what I do over the last couple of years, I wanted to share with you some of the tricks that I've learned along the way, some of the ways that I've been doing it to make it more effective. So that is what I want to bring you on this podcast. So it's sort of an updated take of having used it, having tweaked it, having made it more effective for me and my students. And I want to share that with you. So a write and discuss, if this is new to you, is a guided writing activity that you do in the classroom. Now, this happens after a shared class experience. So that just means any topic or content, anything you do in the classroom, this writing activity, this collaborative writing activity is what happens after. And when we talk about this shared activity, it's about a story in your class that you've done. You've read a story, you've read a chapter, you've done a clip chat, you've done a picture talk, you have read an article, or you have had a discussion, you read a chapter in a CI novel. So anything that you did that you want to then capture and summarize together. So what happens here essentially is that you, the teacher, write a summary or a retelling of the content or the event on the board or on a screen where you're typing with student input, and you're speaking aloud while you're writing and modeling the writing habits as you're going through. So it's not that you as the teacher are just summarizing it and writing it out and then students are reading it along with you, that every detail you're adding to it is coming from the students. So it's everything that they're pulling together from the content of whatever you engaged with throughout the class. What I find particularly useful is that the text that you end up with in the end is so comprehensible to the students because they are contributing all of the details. Now, you as the teacher are making sure that what you're writing is accurate and you're summarizing their details together, but all of the details that are provided are coming directly from the students. So they are, in a sense, creating a very comprehensible text. Now, I'm going to go through some of the details in the process of doing it and some tips and things that I can share with you that you should make sure to do or things to avoid doing based on all of my experience. But as I've been doing lately, when I do a solo podcast episode, I have a blog post that goes along with it, particularly when there are some steps or some details that you need to have that you need to be able to access after listening to it. So you can go to wlclassroom.com/write and discuss. So wlclassroom.com/write and discuss. The link is also in the show notes if you just want to click right there. But it's going to be a good summary of taking all of these ideas together. But what I like doing is when I take a blog post like this and I talk about it here on the podcast, I can explain it and offer in some details that you're not going to find in the blog post. But it's a good place where you can find that summary after the fact if you're not in a place where you can take notes on it right now. So this whole idea of a write and discuss, I'd like to start by just talking about why it is useful. Like, why is this something you'd like to even try? And it essentially, as I said, provides this very rich contextualized input because all of the topic ideas, all of the details, all of the content are coming directly from the students. Now you are asking questions to get them to produce this content for you, but it's so contextualized and it's creating this text that is very comprehensible to them. And it's also helping students to see and process how spoken language becomes written language, because they are offering the details verbally in your classroom in the target language, and you are taking that and you are transforming it into a written text. So it's also helping them to see in real time that process and where some of the punctuation might go, how it might be different than their native language. So it's a good way to take the spoken language and transform it into a written text and to have them see it and be a part of that process. And so that is modeling writing at a level that they understand. So this is really supporting a lot of their literacy development. In general, in all of their classes, it's helping for the literacy development, but particularly in their target language, as you are co-constructing the meaning and building this classroom community where they can see that this text that was created, they contributed to it. Not just contributed, but it's actually all of their ideas that you are putting into a contextualized written text for them so that they can understand. And it's this great opportunity for them to see that process in real time as it's happening. And so they are then having, in the end, this usable class text that you can continue to leverage after the fact for additional reading, because it's going to provide opportunities to look into the grammar that's in it. And I'm going to talk about some ways where you can sort of implement some new grammar structures in there that is in a very comprehensible way, and how you can use this write and discuss to do that. And you have all these possible extension activities that you can continue to do with this very comprehensible text that was based on something that you had done in class, whether it was a video or reading or a discussion. So it is a very useful procedure in the classroom for how you get the text, yes, and students being involved and contributing, but then having the text itself allows so many opportunities for extending beyond what you were doing in the initial activity in the classroom before you did the write and discuss. So how do we do it? So you want to start with that shared experience. It's not necessarily going to be the best if students are reading things individually on their own. You want it to be something that you are collectively reading or you're collectively discussing, something that is being done as a group class activity. Now, you could do this where students are reading individually the same text and pulling information together, but I would say have a discussion first so that you have really assessed the understanding before moving into the write and discuss. You want to make sure that students have that solid grounding before they start adding in the details, because you don't want to be at the point where you're creating this written text at the end, this summary of what you've done, and you're starting to look at some of the incorrect information they might be providing and asking questions in a different way because maybe some students didn't understand it. So you want to make sure that there is a global, solid understanding of whatever you had been discussing or reading or watching, so that when you go to write this text together, that you are mostly getting accurate information that you can then add into it. And I find that that is best done when it's that shared experience rather than individual reading. But again, if they're doing individual reading, have the discussion first to really do that formative assessment of where they are before going into the write and discuss. So for example, if you just watched a video or listened to a song or read a short story or a chapter in a CI novel, have that discussion, have them do some comprehension questions, have them do some individual writing on it maybe, but then for everyone to collectively work together, do the write and discuss where they are creating this text with you, which is a summary of the content and details. Now, before you start the actual writing, you want to frame it so that students truly understand that this is something that is happening together. So you're going to say, let's summarize our story. Let's work together. Let's collaboratively put this together. We're all going to provide details as we go through. So make sure that you are setting the purpose that this is a collaborative activity that students are doing. And so now when it comes to actually writing the text, do it in front of the class and speak while you're typing or writing. Now, you could either write this on a whiteboard, and sometimes if you do that, you end up having to take a picture of it so that you have it so it can live on. But if you are able to project a document such as a Google Doc or a Word doc and type directly into it, then you have it once it's done. Particularly if you're doing this with multiple classes and you're even reading the same text in different classes or watching the same video, the text that you create after is going to be different based on the order in which they provide details or what details they mention or don't mention or how the discussion goes. So you do want to have your specific individualized write and discuss text in the end. And I find the best way to do that, if you can, is to do it digitally so that students can be watching it. But if you don't have that, then just writing on your whiteboard. But if you have a way of capturing it with a phone camera, something like that, so that you can refer to it after. But you do want to be creating the text in a visual way where students can see it being written out in real time. And as you're writing, you want to speak. You want to talk about it. You want to think aloud. You want to pause and ask for ideas. What happened next? What was the character's name? So keep the pace reasonable but engaging, and keeping your whole thought process as you're writing a part of the discussion. That's why we call it a write and discuss. And it's a good opportunity to check for understanding as you go, stopping occasionally and saying, do you know what this word means? Or use gestures or a quick translation if needed, because as you're doing the write and discuss, you are likely, depending on the level of the students, you are likely going to be adding in some extra vocabulary, some grammar structures that students aren't totally familiar with or that they didn't use in their example. And so as you add them in to make it accurate language and I+1 for them, where the language is slightly above their proficiency level, you want to make sure that they are following it and understanding it. Now, since the vast majority is going to be what they are contributing, you are essentially creating a very comprehensible text for them. So because that is going to be 95% of what you are creating, you can add in a little extra with some new vocabulary where they can tell from the context what it might mean, or a grammar structure, or some sort of language twist where you can add something new that they will understand because they already understand the vast majority of the text that you're creating. And once you've created the text together, you want to read it aloud when you're done and let students hear the full polished version. So you could read it aloud and they follow along with you. Sometimes I will have volunteers go along as well and have them read it out loud. You can ask some comprehension questions about what you have written together to make sure that they are understanding it all. And you could do lots of little activities with it. Sometimes I will change details in it and see if they can find what I changed. I will ask some of them to come up and maybe erase a word or type something different in so that when the other students read it, they can find out, oh, what was the detail that was changed? And so you can make it a pretty fun activity that way as well, where you can then leverage the text you've created for extension activities. And there are some questions about whether or not students should be copying the text as you are writing it, or if they should copy it after, or if they should copy it at all. So what I would say is that for me, what has worked well is to have students copy the text very strategically. So I have some classes copy the text while we are creating it. As I am typing it, I will have them actually be writing it along with me. Now, this can be useful to keep some classes more engaged and on task. Now, if you have a very engaged and very well-behaved class, this may not be necessary. But if you have perhaps, say, a large middle school class where keeping them on task and paying attention might be a little bit more of a challenge, you might want to have them write down the text as you are writing it. It keeps them focused, it keeps them engaged. If you have higher level students or just more mature students or students that are better behaved in the classroom, because we always have those classrooms that are challenging, but if you have a classroom that is an easier dynamic to deal with, then you may not have them write it in real time as you are writing. Then there's the possibility of having students copy the text once it is done and it's complete, and you've read it together as a whole class, and you can now have them focus very specifically on this. You could have them do it the same day. If you've done an entire activity in class and you've read something, you've had these discussions, you've watched this video, and you've done the write and discuss, this can be a pretty time-consuming process. So to have them actually write it that day and have the time to do that might not be possible. If you're in a block schedule and you have very long classes, you absolutely could do that. If you're looking at 45, 50-minute classes, may not always be possible. So one procedure that I have found very useful is to use the text as bell work or a do now for the next class. So when students come in, what I will do is I will project up the text that we had created the day before as our write and discuss, and I will have spaces missing where they will fill in words or modify a structure or do something that's different that wasn't from the exact text that we wrote yesterday, and I will have them write the text out and add in those details. And many times they're able to do it pretty accurately and completely because they know all the details that they contributed to it. And so this is an opportunity to revisit and to have this bell ringer, this do now, and in the end they also have a copy of the text, but they're engaging with it very personally, meaningfully, based on all the details they had provided the day before. You could also use it as part of a literacy station if you're doing stations or centers in your classroom where they can copy the text. And other students may be doing other activities, but one of your stations is where they are copying the text. And you could also do it where you have some information that has to change or some gaps they have to fill in, but you can have them do it as a part of a station activity the following day. If you have other listening stations and other things set up, it can be their literacy station. And by having them write it, it's really helping them to reinforce their spelling and their punctuation and a lot of that high frequency vocabulary. So now that we have the process and what we do in the moment, what we do before we do it, and how we can have students copy the text possibly, I want to give you some examples by proficiency level of what the language might look like that you're creating. So if we have a novice low class, you could have a write and discuss that looks like this. This is Sarah. Sarah has a sister. Her name is Anna. So you can see with these, we're sticking to short sentences because they are novice low to mid. There's lots of repetition, cognates, and proper names. So as you're going through, you could have said, who is the character? And they'd say, oh, the character is Sarah. So you say, this is Sarah. And then you ask, does Sarah have any brothers or sisters? Yes, Sarah has a sister. And that's what you write. Sarah has a sister. What is her name? Oh, Anna. They might not say her sister's name is Anna, but they understand the question in the target language, what's her sister's name? And they say Anna, so then you write her name is Anna. So by asking all those questions, you then come up with, this is Sarah. Sarah has a sister. Her name is Anna. So you can see that as that novice low to mid level, you can still be asking the questions and having this discussion completely in the target language. The students are not necessarily providing the full sentences that you're writing, but they're giving you the details and the content, and you as the teacher are putting it into a contextualized sentence where they understand the details. Now, if we look at novice high to intermediate low, you could have something that looks like, first, Diego arrives at the airport with his family. Then they take a bus to La Concha, where they meet their host family. So here, I'm adding in transition words and time markers. So you could ask them, what happens at the beginning of this chapter? Oh, Diego arrives. Okay, where does Diego arrive? Oh, at the airport. And with whom does he arrive? Oh, his family. So you just got all those details from students, that he arrived at the airport with his family. So you write, first Diego arrives at the airport with his family. Then what does he do? What do they do? And they say, oh, they take a bus. Oh, they take a bus. And where do they take the bus? Oh, to La Concha. And why do they take the bus to La Concha? Oh, the host family is there. And then you write, then they take a bus to La Concha, where they meet their host family. And then you put it all together. First, Diego arrives at the airport with his family. Then they take a bus to La Concha, where they meet their host family. Now, whether or not the students are able to produce all of that language as they're providing the content, a lot of that doesn't matter at this point. They're giving you the details, and you're providing this contextualized language. And the more they see this, the more they hear that, then they can start using some of these structures as they are giving you the details as well. And then for intermediate mid and up, so intermediate high going even to that advanced level, you could have a sentence that is something like, although Camilla wanted to win the competition, she helped her friend instead. Here you're possibly using a subjunctive, you're possibly using conditional, depending on what is available in your language, but they are higher registers of language. So you could say here with a question, so what happens here? Oh, Camilla didn't win the competition. Oh, okay, so why didn't she win the competition? Oh, she helped her friend. Oh, so she helped her friend, so what kind of person does that make her? And so you end up with these details and you put it all together. You know, although Camilla wanted to win the competition, she helped her friend instead. And then why did she help her? Why did she want to? Oh, her friend had helped her with something previously, or she's just a very kind person. And you end up putting it all in. So what you're doing here is you're introducing cause and effect or embedded clauses, descriptions, and invite students in their reflection or their opinion on the text. Now, at this level, students could be actually producing a lot of the exact language that you would be using and piecing together in a way that at the lower levels they wouldn't. But again, they may just be giving you some details, and you can then use it to put it in the context where they're going to understand it. But you don't want to just be writing. You want to constantly be asking questions, because the more details that they provide, the more they're going to understand the text and be engaged in the whole process. So once you have this text, one thing I find really effective is then to use it as a grammar lesson and doing something like a pace model. Now, this is one of the biggest wins I find with this. You already have a relevant, student-friendly text, and it is perfect for doing grammar in context because you don't have to worry about the P in the PACE acronym, which is presentation, where you read and make sure students understand a text. They've already created a text that they totally understand. So the A is attention, and then the C is co-construction, and E is extension. So what I'll do is I will write the text and all the details that they're talking about, but I will make sure that I'm putting in a particular language structure or grammar point that I use several times, but within the context of what they're telling me. So when I use this as a PACE model, I will then take that, and then the A is attention in the acronym. And so you highlight the structure in the co-created text, And then you go on to the C, which is co-construction in the PACE model, and you guide students in finding the patterns. So one thing that I find very useful here is when I'm introducing a lot of past tense language, I will take the text, and as they're telling it to me, I will just say, we're going to tell this like it happened yesterday. And so I put every verb in the past tense. They're telling me all the verbs in the present tense as we're talking about the story. I put it in the past. Now, they recognize all the verbs because they're the ones they gave me. And I make sure that every one of the verbs is in the past tense. And then they're able to take that text, which they completely understand, know all the verbs, and they're able to then see what are the patterns that they are following with each of the forms. And they'll say, oh, like it's in Spanish that, if we're talking about what she did, they're all ending in this O with an accent on it, or this I-O with an accent on it. Or if it's in French and they're seeing the past participles. So any language that you do different things in the past tense, they're able to focus in specifically on them. So I really like using a write and discuss text that we co-create as a way of then focusing on grammar, where you sort of sneak in, those grammar points that you want to make sure that they are going to focus on. But I really like this because that first part, that presentation, they created this text. They already understand it. So then why not leverage it to use it as a way to teach grammar in context? So we have a lot of our reasons why this is useful, some examples at the different levels, how to go through the whole process. So I just want to share with you a couple of tips and some things to avoid if you're doing this in your classroom. If this is new to you, take these to heart and try them out. If you've been doing it for a while, maybe you can tweak in some ways the way you're doing it based on this. But the first thing is to either use a document camera or Google Slides or your whiteboard. But if you can, use a digital version so that you have it, that you can do different things with it, particularly if you're doing it with different classes. As much as possible, if you can project a digital slide that you can type on, that will be so much for you. The next thing is to speak the sentences while you're writing it and be thinking aloud in the L2, because this is going to help students to see that writing process. So don't just write the sentences, but saying each word as you're writing it, because they're starting to see that sound letter correspondence and the pronunciation, and also the questions you might ask yourself as you're writing as part of the writing process. So think aloud in the target language. And be sure to call on students to suggest details and not the form of the language, so that it's not necessarily focused on the grammar, where you are getting just the details from the students and you are contextualizing it and putting it into accurate grammar. So allow them to just give those 1 or 2 word answers, longer answers if they are at a higher proficiency level, but it is about eliciting the content from them at this point. The next thing is to keep it short. 5 to 8 sentences is often long enough. This is actually a challenge. You might think, for a novice level class, 5 to 8 sentences seems really long. But once you get into this and you start writing them, you will realize that the sentences can get longer than you expected, and you can have more sentences with more details, because students will want to start to add even more details on that you hadn't even realized that they had picked up on. And then you want to print or post the text later for different activities that you're doing. So don't just do the write and discuss and leave it there, but use it for follow-up activities. Have students do more writing about it. Use it as a way for them to practice their reading aloud. Again, this is a text that they understand. So don't just leave it there. You want to continue to use it as a way to review the material from a previous class or a previous chapter, because again, it's very comprehensible to them. Now, a couple of don'ts. I will say, don't make it a grammar lesson while writing. Save that for later. Focus on the content and the details that students are providing. Then, if you want to focus on the grammar, do a PACE model later with that text, but not to focus on the grammar, because then it becomes a grammar lesson and not this discussion and putting into writing all the details from their discussion. And then the other thing is to not go too fast. Check in with your students, make sure they're comprehending as you're going through. Go slowly. Don't speed it up. And if it feels like, oh, the end of class is coming, let it wait, revisit it the next day. It is better to have the time to do it well rather than just having it rushed and finished before the end of the class. And then the last don't is, I would say, don't write at your students. Often we talk at our students, they're not really engaged. So don't just write it for your students. Make them true collaborators as they're going through. I want to really thank Ben Fisher Rodriguez, who joined me way back on episode 79 to talk about this and to first introduce me to it. It has become a huge part of my teaching, and I found so many great uses for it. So thank you to Ben for bringing the idea to me initially and for giving me the opportunity to run with it and to do lots of great things with students and to present at conferences on it and to share it with teachers. And I'm doing workshops in schools. So always great to pay it forward with that. So be sure to check out the show notes where you will see the link to the blog post that has all these details in it if you'd like to have that in written form. So the link is in the blog post, but you can also just go to wlclassroom.com/write and discuss. And you will also see the link in the show notes to sign up for Talking Points, which is my weekly email newsletter with tips and resources for language teaching. And there are also links to get in touch with me if you would like to work together. And remember, we can do that either in person in your school or remotely. I will talk to you soon. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to the World Language Classroom podcast. Be sure to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening so that you never miss an episode. Let's keep the conversation going on social media. Connect with me on X, aka Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at WL Classroom. And for even more valuable resources, visit my website, wlclassroom.com, where you'll find over 300 blog posts about language teaching. So stay inspired, keep growing, and continue making a difference in your language classroom.